Hello, everyone. I'm so very glad that you can be with me today because I miss you. I'm sorry that we are not able to be together and to pray together. I hope that we'll be able to see each other again very soon. But I'm glad that you're with me today because I want to share a very special book with you. When I was a kid, my mom and dad used to read me these stories. And since we're all going to be apart for a little while longer, I want to have a chance to share these stories with each and every one of you. When I talked to the author recently, she said how excited she was that we were going to share these stories together, and she wanted me to remind you that these stories are for anyone who is young at heart. So I want you to get comfortable. It's all right if you need to pause the video to make sure that all of your pillows are right and that you have everything that you need. And then let's get quiet together and listen. These are The Tales of the Kingdom by David and Karen Maines, with illustrations by Jack Stockman and Zivko Zelev. Chapter 1. The Enchanted City. Once upon a time, not long ago and not far away, there was a boy, no longer a child, and yet not a man, who lived in the Enchanted City. The boy, Scarboy, and his younger brother, Little Child, were not like the other children in the city. Yesterday, their mother had died, and they had immediately been taken into custody by the enchanter's men. Rumor said that the enchanter kept orphans to stoke the huge fires that burned deep in the hold of Dagoda, the temple where the enchanter lived and ruled. A burner, one of the secret police who carried out the enchanter's bidding, had brought the boys to the burning place, a vast square of ashes. There they would watch the funeral ceremonies for their mother, whose body rested on an ornate bier in the middle of the field. The thought of his mother choked the older boy. She had been so beautiful as the daughter of a king. There is a king, his mother had always insisted, a real king. She believed the ancient tales, even though signs were posted all over Enchanted City. There's no such thing as a king. Death to pretenders. But his mother had become ill, as did so many in the foul air of Enchanted City. In the last days before she died, she slipped in and out of a fever, often telling Scarboy the ancient tales from her childhood. Once a great king ruled our city, she said. All the people thought him beautiful and served him willingly. But the enchanter came and deceived the people and put a spell on the city. The king was exiled. Those who would find him must hunt for him in the place where trees grow. Umfa, 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 din. The death drums interrupted the boy's memories. Now he heard the ceremonial bells sewn to the hem of the fire priest's robes. He heard the mourners' chants. Then a swish and an explosion. The funeral flames had been ignited. As the swirling swords of fire leapt toward the sky, a long line of shining cars, low and shadowy and quiet, moved toward the field and parked at the edge of Burning Place. The boy's heart pounded. The enchanter had come to the funeral ceremony. Scarboy watched the tall man step out into the field of ashes. The boy saw the amber hair that curled and caught the light of the blazing fire. A handsome man, most thought. But Scarboy's mother had said that the look in his eyes was cruel. The boy took Little Child's hand and held him close. The enchanter was wearing the robe of fire, a mastery of woven color, red and yellow patterns interwoven with orange and white and blue. Burners, each holding a glowing poker in their hands, climbed out from the other cars. Soon, the tall, proud man was surrounded by these guards. The enchanter ruled Enchanted City with fire. He loved fire, loved its power. He loved calling it to himself. He used it to cast spells. Long ago, he had decreed night to be day and day to be night because he was so jealous of the light of the sun. Now the people of Enchanted City rose from their beds to work and play and eat when the moon, the lesser light, came up. They went to sleep at dawn. Mothers tucked their children beneath the covers and said, "Morning, morning, see you in the night." The enchanter turned and looked across the ash field at the two boys as the drums beat out his personal rhythm. Din, din, din. "Are these the orphans?" he called, pointing at them. A burner nodded. With quick, long strides, the tall man covered the field between them. Burners marched behind the enchanter in formation. Each held high a poker, which was now smoldering with hot power. Scarboy covered his cheek with his hand. The enchanter faced the boys. The man's eyes widened and then narrowed. Suddenly, the enchanter reached down and removed Scarboy's hand from his cheek. Then the ruler lifted the boy's chin. "What is that on your face? Why were you not outcast from the city?" The boy squirmed. He wanted to scream for fear. He wanted to kick and run. The man's touch was hot. He struggled to keep calm. It's not a disease, sire. I wasn't born with a defect, an accident at branding. It was the truth. Long ago, as was the custom when a child was 5, Burners had taken all the children of Enchanted City who were his age to brand their hands with a hot poker. "You're now signed with the mark of the enchanter," the men cried. "Never forget you belong to the keep of the great Burner." But the boy had screamed and bitten and kicked, and in the struggle the cruel brand had fallen either by accident or by purpose on his cheek. He would bear the scar for the rest of his life. People always pointed at him and gasped. They turned their eyes away. Children pointed and shouted, "Scarboy! Hey, you Scarboy!" Soon he had learned to cover his face with his hand. Now Scarboy remembered his mother's final words. "Take little child and escape. Escape before branding time, before little child turns 5. Escape before the enchanter comes." But it was too late. The enchanter held the boy's chin with a vice-like grip. The man bent close, and the boy shuddered at the waves of heat. "Your mother foolishly believed in kings," the enchanter whispered. How did he know that? Scarboy wondered. He noticed the burner's pokers flashed, a sudden red hot at those words. The enchanter's lips smiled kindly, but his eyes were all malice. "And what does her son, her orphan son, believe?" The boy pulled his chin out of the man's clutch. He covered his cheek again with his hand. He cast his eyes to the ground. "I've never seen a king, sire. Only an enchanter." The cruel eyes narrowed even more. "Seeing is believing. See that you keep it so, orphan. Keep it so." And with that, the great burner turned on his heel, the guard marching beside him, the drums keeping pace. Din, din, din. Then they had gone. Scarboy's lungs screamed for cool air. His heart timed escape, escape, escape. He would rather die than be a slave of the enchanter, but it was too late for such thoughts. Scarboy felt a strong hand on his elbow, the butt of an iron poker shoved into his side by the burner, whose eyes were hollows of darkness, empty even of the dancing light of the reflected flames. "Come," he said, "to the orphan keeper with you." The three moved away from the burning place. Down little streets, past narrow buildings, night lights stood on poles and lit the way. Day was far off. When they came to the market, Scarboy could hear the jumble of bins. He could hear the haggling and the barter under the awnings. The burner had released his hold, but it didn't matter. His hard poker still jabbed Scarboy in the side. The boy knew that he could never outrun his captor. Little Child whimpered, and Scarboy lifted him up. Suddenly, the power failed. "Lights out! Lights out!" people cried. Power-outs were frequent, but at this precise moment it seemed like a miracle. The Enchanted City needed man-made power to live by and to light the night. Everything ran on energy from furnaces beneath the city, which were stoked with fuel. Buses and cars and buildings were attached to underground cables, but the fuel supply was always running low. The man-made power was always failing. In power-outs, traffic stopped. Homes and places of business became dark. The clocks ran off time, on time, in between time. Even play didn't work. Sometimes the lights failed right in the middle of the ninth inning, just when they were needed most. But Scarboy knew this power out was his chance to escape. He bolted away from the burner, carrying Little Child safely in his arms. "Runaways! Runaways!" The burner shouted, but no one heard him in the confusion. Horns blared, pushcarts banged against each other's. Vendors yelled, "Hey, get that thief! Hands off my stuff!" as vagrants took advantage of the power failure to acquire food. Everyone screamed, "Lights! Lights!" Amid all this din, Scarboy made a successful getaway. He ran with his little brother in his arms, ran until his heart felt like bursting. When the power came back on, Scarboy stopped his frantic running. He had lost his way, and he knew that soon the burners would come looking for them. The enchanter would not be cheated out of what he owned. Fortunately, dawn was coming. All would obey the edict, "Sleep in the light," except the burners, who would keep hunting even though the bright lights hurt their eyes. If only Scarboy could stay awake and hide until he found the way out. But what was the way out? Could it be that there was a king, as his mother had said? Would it ever be possible to find the place where this king lived? Scarboy crept into a hole beneath the porch steps of a nearby house, so he could buy time to think. "It's not dark in the place where trees grow," his mother had said. But there were no trees in the city, because all had been chopped down for fuel. Scarboy knew trees grew in forests. He had heard there was a forest somewhere outside the city, if only he knew the way. A timeman walked by crying the hour, 2 more hours before day. Suddenly, Scarboy heard the drums. They beat loud and angry. "Ba-pa-pa-m, ba-pa-pa-m, ba-pa-pa-m." The boy knew they were drumming about him. There was no safety now, no hiding place. Every shadow could hold a burner. The boy found a little money in his pocket. He'd heard that taxi drivers could get you where you needed to go if anyone could. But would a taxi be safe? Surely taxi drivers knew the message of the drum beats. Scarboy had to take a chance. He grabbed his brother's hand, looked carefully up and down the street, and then hailed a cab. "Can you get us to the end of the city where the forest is?" he asked the driver as a cab pulled up to the curb. The driver looked the two boys over with shrewd eyes. Sure, he said, "but hurry, curfew's coming. Pay in advance, refund only in case of power failure." Scarboy took a deep breath, and the boys climbed in. The taxi driver set his meter and connected the power. Screeching through the little-traveled streets, he made his way quickly to a huge garbage dump at the edge of the city. Scarboy had never been there. "End of the line," the man said urgently. "Passengers out." Scarboy felt hesitant. "Is this near where the trees grow?" The driver leaned over the back seat and opened the back door. "The line only goes this far. This here's the dump." And then he winked his eye and said, "If you look hard enough, you'll find where the trees grow." The boys climbed out, and as the cab sped away, Scarboy thought he heard the man shout, "To the king!" To the king. The phrase echoed through Scarboy's mind. But he had little time to wonder about the cab driver's strange farewell, for the familiar sound of the drums, "Ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum," interrupted his thoughts and forced him to look around for a safe hiding place, or better yet, the beginning of a forest. Little Child began to cough and whine. "Hush," Scarboy whispered. The two boys sat on the cinder road. A gray line of light split the sky above the world. Little Child fell asleep. But Scarboy waited for day to come. He listened to the distant drums. Something's wrong here, Scarboy thought. Suddenly he realized that the shadows were moving. Scarboy was sure that he had seen a distant gray form move toward him. That one there. And that one. The gray in the sky spread. He could see by its light. Over the hills of garbage, men were creeping toward him. "Burners," thought Scarboy. Without a word they crept silently closer. One there, another there. The boy bent and lifted his sleeping brother. His knees were weak with fear. He was surrounded on three sides by an advancing menace. He could see them more clearly as the sky began to brighten. The message drums were sounding far off from within the city, but they were beating faster and faster and faster. Quickly, Scarboy stood erect and faced the shadows. He had not come this far to give up now. He balanced Little Child in one arm and waved the blade of a pocket knife defiantly with his other hand. "No!" he shouted. "I will not be your man. If there's a king, I'll find him. If there's a way, I'll hunt it out. I'll fight you to the last." And at that moment, dawn broke behind the boy. The sky flushed pale pink, then warmed to rose. The burners paused. Their eyes could not bear the bright light. Scarboy heard a strange, musical humming. It seemed to come from the other side of an old gate that he hadn't noticed at the edge of the garbage dump. The burners stopped, shielding their eyes, looking up at the ever-brightening sun. In that minute of advantage, Scarboy turned and ran. He raced with Little Child in his arms toward the old closed gate, away from the enchanter's stunned henchmen. Wild weeds grew up around the stone gateposts. The wrought iron latch was rusted. Breathless, the boy stopped and rattled the gate. Just then the sun blazed radiant above them, and the gate began to creak slowly open. Waiting impatiently for entrance, the boy glanced up at the arch. Words were chiseled there in the old moss-covered stones. "Welcome all who hunt." Scarboy squeezed himself and his brother into the ever-widening entrance. He was breathless. Little Child was heavy. How could he close the gate? Where could he hide next? "You called?" asked a voice behind him. The boy whirled to find the funniest-looking man that he had ever seen. The creature was tall and wore a small tree on his head for a hat. His clothes were a color between green and brown and gray. A set of keys dangled from a vine which circled his waist. He had a long white hairs that hung down his head and a long white beard, and both of them were tucked into his belt. His coat had pockets, and his vest had pockets, and his pants had pockets, all of them filled with pruning shears and scissors and trowels. The man was holding a hatchet, carved with strange markings in front of his face. Slowly, he lifted it with both hands above his head, and Scarboy noticed that the musical hum was coming from the hatchet. The gate slammed shut. The drums outside stopped beating. All was quiet. Scarboy was aware of only one sound. What was that? Was it a bird singing? The sound fit his mother's description, but he'd never heard a melody before. There were no wild things in Enchanted City. He looked down at his brother in his arms. Little Child was as quiet as if he were in a deep coma. "Welcome, hunter," said the strange man, who chuckled. He hung the hatchet on his belt. Every bump he made sounded with jingling, tools bumping against still other tools. "Are you the king?" Scarboy wondered. "No," said the man, laughing. He walked close and lifted the heavy child from Scarboy's arms. "I'm one of the king's men. I am caretaker, and you are hero. Welcome to Great Park." "That's not my name," the boy protested, his empty hand moved by habit to cover his scar. The man chuckled again. "It's more your name than you know," he said, and then he turned and walked down the path. Scarboy watched him. Every now and then, Caretaker took a little hop, and when he did, every inch of him jingled and chimed. The boy was astonished at this silly creature. A king's man, he thought. His wonder increased. Caretaker stopped and looked back at him. "Come," he said, "we will go to Mercy." Scarboy watched the man dance down the path. Then he noticed that full day had come. The boy looked around at the trees and the bushes and glorious spreads of green grass, all growing things. He took a deep breath and filled his lungs with cool air. Hero. He would wait and see if such a name belonged to him. A king's man. Where then was the king? He would keep watch for a king. After all, seeing is believing, as the enchanter said. One thing he did know. His mother had been right. It was not dark in this place where the trees grew. There was hardly any darkness at all. The boy hurried to follow after Caretaker, feeling in his heart as though he had discovered something he had been hunting after all of his life. And so the boy escaped from the perilous Enchanted City because he was a hunter at heart, and hunters always find more than they know.